Redline Logbook here for another Danmachi video, and I'm going to be talking about this image here. And what this image is basically a card that came out about a year ago in the special release of Volume 2 of Danmachi. It was a special re-release in Japan. And the card basically lays out the stats of the Minotaur that Bell fought, or at least that's what it's supposed to be. I have issues with it. But starting with the card has to say, roughly the Minotaur is 7'3". It's a level 2, it has a killing technique called Rush, and all of its stats are Strength 1980, Endurance 1700, Agility 950, Dexterity 200, and Magic 0. So what is the issue that I have with this? Well, let's go to what everyone started saying after this card came out, which is we now know how much of a stat boost you get when you level up. Everyone assumed you get 1,000 points, and they base that off of the Minotaur strength stat, which is 1980. Which makes sense if you only focus on the strength. The only problem is that the Minotaur is a level 2 monster, and it has stats that are below 1,000. So if it just gets a net 1,000 power based on a level up, then all of its stats should be over 1,000. But its agility and dexterity are both below that. In fact, dexterity is way below that. Another major issue is that monsters don't have a leveling system like adventurers do, where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, up and up. Monsters are born at a certain level, and they can increase it by eating magic stones, but that's a completely different leveling process. When a Minotaur is born, it is a level 2, period, end of discussion. It can be a low level 2, it can be a high level 2, it can be somewhere in the middle, but it's always going to be a level 2. There's never a level 1 Minotaur, so it has no level 1 stats to even increase off of. Its base stats are its level 2 stats. On top of that, the way monsters level up by eating other monsters' magic stones, it's not as simple as just a 1,000 point increase. We know this because, let's go with the Minotaur. If a Minotaur ate another Minotaur stone, it would gain the full power of that other Minotaur. Basically, it would be double in strength. That's why enhanced species are such a threat in Danmachi, because monsters are able to level up so fast, because they're able to just consume magic stone after magic stone. But even if a Minotaur ate another Minotaur's magic stone and gained all of its strength, giving its stats close to 4,000 at that point, it still would not be a level 3 monster. Or a level 4 monster. It would still be a level 2 Minotaur. It would just be a really strong level 2 Minotaur. A good example of this is the Moss Huge that went after Bell's party during the expedition arc. It sent a pass parade after them, and Bell's team were just slaughtering blue crab after blue crab and other monsters that were coming at them. All of those monsters are all level 2 monsters, and the Moss Huge was like a low level 4. It consumed magic stone after magic stone of all those slain monsters to bump itself up. But even at the end of that, it was still just a level 4 monster. Even with all those magic stones, even with all that power up, even with thousands of points added to its stats, it still was not able to increase its strength past a level 4. That's why Bell was able to kill it one-on-one. And before someone says, well, Bell's stats are just crazy, that's why he was able to do it, you gotta remember, Aisha was also putting up a pretty good fight against this mutated Moss Huge. It wasn't until it shot its tentacle maw thing at her and injected her with its seeds, which created the poison ivy that zapped her strength. Up to that point, she was actually doing a pretty good job fighting against it. So if I'm being completely honest, I really don't think this is something that Fuji Umori came up with himself. I'm guessing someone on the staff who was working on selling new copies of the books probably came up with it, and he just approved it because he really didn't care. But I also know that's just not that fun, and so that's why I decided that maybe there is a way to justify this to make sense. Maybe this is purposeful by Fuji Umori. And so I decided to think about it and come up with an explanation of how these stats for the Minotaur make sense. And the conclusion I came to is that obviously there's a separate leveling system for monsters than there are for people. And how do they compare? Well, this is my theory. Once again, this is not canon whatsoever. This is just by going with what I think it is, the only way it makes sense to me. So the stats that we were given, like a year ago in this booklet, is the level of the average Minotaur that's going to be born in the dungeon. Some will be stronger, some will be weaker, but this is the average. Which means the one that Bell fought in the third novel was roughly this strong. And if you look at its agility, it's 950. This is important because at the time, Bell's agility was 1049. It was double S, his only double S skill at the time. In fact, after he kills the Minotaur, all of his stats go to double S, and his agility jumps to triple S, and that's when he gets his level up after that. This is important because Bell at this time said he's just about even with speed with the Minotaur. And if we're going by raw stats, then yes, Bell is over 1,000, and the Minotaur is over 900, so they're relatively close to one another. So if that's true, and that these stats are actually relatively close to one another, number by number, that means every stat the Minotaur has is technically closer to a level 1 stat than it is to a level 2 stat. What I mean by this is that when an adventurer levels up from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or whatever, let's stick with 1 and 2, it's simpler. So you have two adventurers, one's level 1, one's level 2, they both have I stats, they work really hard, and they get that I stat up to an H stat. Here's the thing, the level 2 going from I to H is a much greater increase than the level 1 going from I to H. So what would be 100 points for a level 1 in comparison, while it's on the stat sheet 100 points for the level 2 going from I to H, it really isn't. It's way more than that. It'd be the equivalent of a level 1 going up 200, if not 300 points, if that makes sense. So going back to the Minotaur, that means all the Minotaur stats, in my theory, is that they're all based on level 1 stats. They're not based on a level 2 adventurer stats. Because if the Minotaur's agility was based off of level 2 stats, a level 2 with an agility of 950, that would be S tier speed at a level 2. The Minotaur would be able to speed blitz Bell easily. In fact, it would be able to speed blitz most level 2s at that point if its speed was an S tier at level 2, which means its speed has to be S tier at level 1, which would mean its strength and endurance stats are also based on level 1 stats. So if it was an adventurer, it would be Minotaur, level 1, strength 1980, 11S, endurance 1700, 9S. And that is why it is considered a level 2 monster, because unless you're Bell and you have Leia's freeze and you can break your limiter, no other adventurer can do that. The limit for all your stats is 999S. No double S, no triple S, nothing like that. Nothing that Bell can do can any other adventurer do. As a result, a Minotaur should be invincible against a level 1, but in this case, Bell 1, of course. Now, I'm sure that there are people in the comments saying, hey, doesn't this just prove that a level up is 1,000 points of Excelia? Because the Minotaur's a level 2, and if you're saying that being 11S is a level 2 monster, then that must be it, right? Except here's the thing. Once again, this only applies to monsters, it does not apply to adventurers who level up. Because when an adventurer levels up to level 2, it doesn't matter if their stats were significantly weaker. As soon as they level to a level 2, they can just hack through level 2 monsters like the Minotaur, like their butter. Welf, with like I and H stats at level 2, just hack through armies of Minotaurs, bugbears, blue crabs, all kinds of monsters that are level 2. And the reason why I'm using Welf as an example is because when Welf leveled up, his strength stat was in the 600s, and his endurance was in the 500s. So if all he got was a mere 1,000 points added to his fauna, then he would still be weaker than a Minotaur when he first leveled up. But he wasn't. He was able to cut through them. In fact, he should have been weaker than all level 2 monsters, but he wasn't. He cut through all of them. Which means leveling up has to be more than just 1,000 points of Excelia. There's only 2 adventurers who are level 2 that I can think of that are currently weaker than a Minotaur, and that is Lily and Haruhime. Let's focus on Lily. Haruhime is not a fighter in any way, shape, or form, so let's just leave her out of it. Let's focus on Lily. When Lily leveled up to level 2, her strength and endurance stats were both H stats, which means they were both in the hundreds. In fact, her strength stat was like 106. It was barely an H stat. Where I would put Lily's strength at, I would say, is comparable to a Minotaur. It's slightly weaker then, but I would still say it's roughly around the power of a Minotaur. The reason why I say this is because whenever the Hestia family went into the deeper floors, literally the deep floors, for their expeditions in recent volumes, she played her role not just as the commander of the group, but also as supporter, where she did covering fire with her crossbow and other things like that. And she was able to do this against monsters which are technically level 3 and level 4 monsters at this point, which means she actually plays a useful part against higher level monsters now that she's a level 2. So she has gained the relative strength of a level 2. In fact, if I'm being completely honest, I actually think Lily could probably kill a Minotaur if she could use all of her little tricks. But we're talking raw strength right now, and I would say she's about even at the moment. And if this is true, then that means a level up is roughly 2,000 points on top of everything. Because if a Lily is roughly equal to a Minotaur in strength at level 2, and she's like the bottom barrel you can be a level 2 at, that means a Minotaur is the bottom barrel what a adventurer can be, and its stats are roughly 2,000. Honestly, it'd be really funny that when Volume 21 comes out, Lily ends up one-shotting a Minotaur as they're making their way down to save the Loki Familia. Because that will just prove that the increase is actually greater than 2,000. It's probably 3,000. Because even Lily, with the worst stats at level 1, is still able to one-shot a Minotaur when leveling up. Honestly, that would be really funny if that happens. Then I would have to do a little short update on this video. But what are the odds of that? Anyway, this is my personal theory of how leveling works for monsters. They basically have all their Excelia existing as one giant thing instead of being cut into pieces like adventurers do, like level 1, 2, 3. Nope, for monsters it's just one giant thing. And when an adventurer levels up, they most likely are getting like a 2,000 point increase. And as I said before, that 2,000 point increase is actually greater each level you do, because each level, any increase in points is greater. So going from like a level 2 to a level 3, it would be 2,000 points, but to a level 1, it would be like getting 4,000 points, or maybe greater. Okay, I hope I was able to explain my thoughts clearly, and so all this made sense. If not, please ask questions in the comments, and I'll try to clarify. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give a thumbs up so you can enjoy more Danmachi and other anime things. Thank you, and have a great day.